Something feels off. You work hard, play by the rules, save when you can. But that heavy feeling still lingers. What if the problem isn't how much you make, but what you believe money will give you? Because here's the harsh truth. Most people aren't chasing money. They're chasing an illusion. The illusion that money will fix their insecurities, their loneliness, their lack of meaning. But money doesn't heal. It amplifies. And that's exactly where Machiavelli comes in. To him, money was never the goal. It was leverage, a lens, a test. He watched kings, senators, generals, and saw that money didn't grant power. It revealed it. If you don't understand how wealth is used to distract, control, and expose people, you'll be owned by it, even while thinking you're free. That's one of the most ignored truths Machiavelli ever hinted at. But there's a detail here nobody talks about. I'll get to it in a second. First, hit that subscribe button. This channel is close to hitting a major milestone, and your support could be the one that pushes us over. If this content already made you think differently, imagine what's coming next. When you subscribe, you're not just supporting a channel. You're joining a rare group, people who see beyond the surface. And in today's world, that's already a form of freedom. Now let's talk about a man who thought he had won, and was seconds away from losing it all. Jake was 34. He worked as a financial analyst for a mid-sized company in Chicago. For years, he was quiet, consistent, the type who kept his head down and always delivered more than he promised. Then, one day, he got promoted. A higher salary, quarterly bonuses, a corporate card, and for the first time, a glass office with a skyline view. But something shifted. Within weeks, Jake walked differently. He started posting on LinkedIn almost daily, sharing pictures of upscale dinners, quoting leadership books, and preaching about growth mindset. That quiet humility turned into performative confidence. Jake believed money had transformed him, but Machiavelli would have said otherwise. Money didn't change Jake. It simply exposed who he already was. That's where the first rule cuts deep. Money doesn't build character. It reveals it. A man who feels small without applause will use his salary as a megaphone. A woman afraid of being invisible will hide behind luxury brands. The manipulator will discover generosity as a way to control. The insecure will spend money trying to buy respect, and they'll all call it success. Machiavelli didn't listen to what people claimed. He watched how they moved when gold started filling their pockets. He knew real strength is quiet. It doesn't need to prove itself. Because true power isn't loud. It shapes the room without effort. If you walk into a room and need to show you have money, you've already lost. And Jake? Less than a year later, he hit burnout. Drowning in debt, crushed by comparison, isolated. He didn't want wealth. He wanted to be seen. And when visibility mattered more than stability, his life became a performance with no backstage. The promotion didn't elevate him. It gave a stage to an old insecurity. Now ask yourself honestly, is money lifting you up or simply showing you who you are? We live in an age where everything is on display. Clothes, trips, earnings, even bank screenshots. The "look what I achieved" culture has become the norm. But Machiavelli would have laughed at this. Because in the real game of power, what's visible becomes vulnerable. What's shown too often draws envy, schemes, and eventually attack. To Machiavelli, money was like a weapon. And once your enemy knows you're armed, it loses its edge. Exposure isn't confidence, it's an invitation. People who show too much are secretly asking for something: approval, admiration, fear. And all of that reveals a need money can't truly fix. That's why he preached concealment, not as cowardice, but as strategic defense. The silent mover avoids the spotlight. The discreet player escapes the target zone. And most importantly, those who appear to have less are often left alone. While the loud become markers of success, the quiet build with space and time. The logic is clean. No one attacks what they underestimate. The less they expect from you, the more freedom you have to move. This applies to money, influence, even business strategy. While others scream numbers, the true players are designing silent systems. Because real power doesn't live in the showcase. It lives in the silence. Now, ask yourself, how many opportunities have you lost trying to impress the wrong people? What if the real move isn't to prove your value, but to hide your capacity? Because in the end, the strongest empires are the ones no one knows about. There's a sharp difference between making money and owning it. Most people feel secure as long as the salary drops, the card swipes, the platform pays. But Machiavelli saw this as the most sophisticated form of imprisonment. Because if someone can shut off your income with a phone call, that income was never yours. It was rented. And when your freedom is rented, you live under a quiet fear. The fear of stepping out of line, of being cut off, of no longer being useful. That fear shapes your choices, your behavior, even your values. The employee who stays silent despite injustice. The creator who filters truth to keep brand deals. The consultant who says yes to everything, because saying no costs too much. This is the system Machiavelli knew too well. He understood that the one who feeds you decides your limits. And it's even more dangerous when you think you're in control. Because comfort is deceptive. You believe you're safe when in fact you're deeply exposed. That's not freedom. That's a facade. A castle built on sand. So his advice was harsh but clear. Build income that survives silence. Create systems that don't collapse when the applause stops. Only then do you become dangerous. Not because you want to attack, but because no one can threaten you. When you no longer need approval to exist, you finally start moving with truth. And the real power here isn't in what you gain. It's in what you can walk away from. The deal you turn down, the offer you ignore, the room you exit before you're dismissed. Because dependence makes you quiet. But independence? That shapes rooms, without a word. Human relationships shift when money enters the room. Words like loyalty, friendship, and partnership sound solid, until numbers appear. Machiavelli never believed in what people said when things were equal. He watched what happened when someone started rising, inherited something, or simply began to grow. That's when the masks fell. When you level up, reactions aren't neutral. Many smile, but few truly accept it. Someone else's progress shines a harsh light on your own stagnation. Machiavelli saw this clearly. He didn't trust those who clapped from a distance but vanished when success got too close. Because money doesn't change people. It reveals what they were hiding. And it's not just about earning. It's also about giving. Try offering someone an opportunity and just watch. See how they handle access, advantage, or favors. Do they become arrogant, entitled, quietly resentful? Machiavelli used generosity not to please, but to read people. To see who stayed grounded and who only showed up when there was something to gain. That's why he valued distance, not as detachment, but as clarity. The more you observe in silence, the more money shows you the truth. You don't need conflict. You don't need obvious tests. You just need structure. And watch who can handle your growth without collapsing. Because not everyone around you wants to see you rise. And not every compliment is clean. In the end, money doesn't destroy relationships. It only reveals which ones were never real. There are two types of people when it comes to money. Those who chase it, and those who realize the world is full of people starving for it, and use that hunger to steer behavior. Machiavelli never idolized money for what it could buy. He studied how it could bend people. He understood that those who distribute wealth control direction, and whoever controls access controls the environment. It was true for kings, true for empires. And it's no different now. The names changed, but the pattern didn't. The giver shapes. The payer sets the tempo. And the strangest part? Most people never notice. They're too busy chasing the prize to see who's designing the game. The power of those who control access doesn't come from how much they have, but how they position themselves in the system. They don't beg for attention. They build dependency. They live at the source, not at the end of the pipeline. While most dream of their next raise, these few are designing the structure that decides who gets what and when. Machiavelli called this the architecture of influence, a game where position matters more than performance, where being at the center beats being in the spotlight, because the one who controls the oxygen never has to gasp for air. He watches, he calculates, and he waits. Because in the end, real control rarely speaks. Most people are at war over scraps, fighting for titles, promotions, bonuses, recognition. But Machiavelli saw a flaw buried deep in this behavior. He knew the true player doesn't chase the prize. He builds the system that hands out the prizes. While others chase the paycheck, he focuses on who cuts the checks. This logic is sharp and unforgiving. The world runs on symbols, and money is one of the most seductive. But symbols aren't sources, and those who get blinded by the glow forget to ask who flipped the switch. Machiavelli let others fight for the appearance of power. Meanwhile, he shaped the structure that made that appearance possible. He understood early on that anything given can be taken back. Titles, status, applause, all fragile. But those who can design systems, they endure. Real control lives in creation, not conquest. That's why he didn't care to be the richest face in the room. He wanted to be the name no one mentioned, but everyone instinctively followed. When you focus on competing, you play by rules you didn't write. But when you learn to shape the field, the dynamics flip. You don't have to win. You just have to decide when the game starts and when it ends. Machiavelli understood that people don't just move because of desire. They shift their behavior out of fear, specifically the fear of losing what they believe they already secured. A job, a lifestyle, a sense of status. Once someone gets a taste of stability, nearly everything they do becomes an attempt to preserve it. That's where quiet control begins. When you give comfort, you shape identity. When you pull back, even slightly, you create doubt. A delay, a silence, a changed tone. These aren't threats. They're subtle disruptions that trigger deeper fears. Did I mess up? Am I being replaced? That mild unease is often more powerful than any explicit command. Machiavelli didn't raise his voice. He didn't issue ultimatums. He crafted environments where the fear of losing privilege did the work for him. Not privilege as luxury, but as belonging. Once that belonging feels threatened, people adjust quickly. They agree, they comply, they self-correct. This isn't manipulation. It's recognition of human nature. Nobody wants to fall back after climbing even a single step. And the higher someone rises through your influence, the more sensitive they become to the possibility of slipping. That vulnerability doesn't need to be exploited. It needs to be managed with precision. This is where real power holds, not in loud moves, but in the invisible grip of an atmosphere where the fear of losing what you gave outweighs the motivation to create it alone. In today's world, people who flaunt wealth often believe they're commanding respect. But Machiavelli saw something different. When someone walks into a room showing off, the powerful don't admire, they calculate. Real respect doesn't come from what you display. It comes from what you control. And the more visible your wealth is, the easier it becomes to target. Those who truly hold power rarely speak about it. Because what's discreet can't be measured, and what can't be measured can't be attacked. But those who showcase everything invite quiet questions. How much is debt? How much was luck? How long will it last? Machiavelli understood that exposure doesn't generate authority. It reveals a need to be seen, and that need is exploitable. When someone craves attention, they've already revealed their weakness. They rely on external validation to maintain internal identity. And anyone watching closely will learn how to bend that person. True strength is felt in silence, in the absence of trying to prove, in the calm of someone who can, but doesn't need to. That's why the most dangerous people are usually the quietest. They're not trying to be noticed. They already know their presence is enough, even when they say nothing. There's a rare moment, almost invisible, when a person stops being ruled by money. And it doesn't come when they hit a number. It happens when they realize the number never defined anything. Machiavelli paid close attention to this point. True power, he believed, appeared not when someone gained more, but when they could lose it and remain intact. Many build their identity around their wealth. They lose their name, their direction, their judgment, all to maintain the image of success. But the true Machiavellian moves differently. He earns, multiplies, reinvests, but never becomes what he owns, because he understands. Money isn't the destination. It's a tool. The freedom that matters is walking into a room without the need to impress, saying no without fear, ending a deal without needing permission, not out of superiority, but because there's nothing left to prove. That's the difference between the rich and the free. One accumulates to be seen, the other builds to stand quietly. And that silence isn't emptiness, it's confidence. The kind that comes from knowing you could start over, anytime, and still win. Because what holds you up isn't external, it's internal. Self-control, strategy, patience. Machiavelli saw this as the highest form of dominance. The kind of power you don't see, but feel, in how someone enters and exits a room without needing anything. If you've made it this far, you've likely realized Machiavelli never cared about the shine of gold. What he studied was the reflection, what money revealed, what people's reactions exposed, and most importantly, what remained after the noise faded. To him, the game was never about visible conquest. It was about invisible presence. Think back to Jake, the man who thought his promotion made him untouchable. In the end, he became transparent. Meanwhile, Machiavelli moved in the opposite direction. He didn't dominate through appearance. He influenced through silence, through the fact that, wherever he stood, the atmosphere shifted, even when he said nothing. Real power isn't in what you own. It's in how you carry yourself when you no longer need to prove anything, when your structure speaks for you, when effortlessness becomes your signature. When money stops being the goal and becomes a byproduct, if this stirred something in you, pause. Because most people won't get this. They'll keep believing power lives in exposure, volume, and speed. But if you stayed until now, maybe you're searching for something else. And that alone means you're already playing a different game.